Your support helps us bring you programs you love. Go to WyomingPBS.org, click on Support, and become a sustaining member or an annual member. It's easy and secure. Thank you.
You've probably heard of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, but what about Tom O'Day? He also was a member of the colorful Old West outlaw gang called the Wild Bunch. These days, historical reenactor Ray Maple of Cody enjoys portraying Tom O'Day to audiences around Wyoming and teaches a lot of local history in the process. We'll meet two colorful Wyoming characters, Ray Maple and Tom O'Day. I'm Steve Peck of WyomingPBS. This is Wyoming Chronicle.
Funding for this program is made possible in part by the Wyoming Humanities Council, helping Wyoming take a closer look at life through the humanities, thinkwy.org, and by the members of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. Thank you for your support.
Ray Maple has done lots of different things in his life. He's been a cowboy, an EMT, an author, a competitive shooter, even a movie producer. And for the past quarter century, he's also entertained and informed audiences around Wyoming and the West with his historical portrayal of Tom O'Day, a horse-thieving outlaw who rode with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid during the waning days of the Old West frontier. Now 79 years old, Ray Maple said he got interested in Tom O'Day because of a different hobby.
I got involved in this being a single-action shooter.
I see.
And when you become a single-action shooter, you have to pick an alias. So I picked Tom O'Day for an alias. Then I looked up what I could find of him, and Mrs. Henry there at Lost Cabin had written a little pamphlet with it, had a picture of him in it, and that's how I got started.
Drawing from a vast personal memory bank and supplementing his story with slides custom-made for the act, Ray puts on his hat, gets into character, and starts the narrative of Tom O'Day.
I was born in Donegal Township, Washington County, Pennsylvania. My dad was a Union cavalryman during the war, and he fought battles at Harper's Ferry and VMI. He fought 30-some battles. He came to the States in 1849 or thereabouts, just during the potato famine, and he met with this local gal there. They ended up having a bunch of kids. Tom being the second oldest, he had an older sister. Well, they moved to Dunlop, Iowa, and got a homestead. After a while, he turned about 14, and he said, "Dad, I don't want to be a farmer. I want to be a cowboy. I want to head west. I want to go to maybe Wyoming." And he said, "Okay, son, you can do that." So he picked out a horse and got some tack, and his mom fixed me a lunch. And I headed off. Went up through Nebraska, did a whole bunch of different jobs along the way. I broke horses as a bronc buster, as a cowboy, a roundup cook, and when things really got tough, herded sheep. I got to Wyoming about 1892 or thereabouts, and I hooked up with John Logan. He had the KC brand, and I'm still a pretty young fella. He hired me on, and he kind of showed me the ropes. He was also kind of a mavericker, for lack of a better word, and taught me a lot about that too. And of course, I broke horses. I did that from the time I was a kid. One night we were talking, and they said, or John said, "You know, it's kind of a dry spell between Casper and Buffalo. Let's get us a bar." So we had the first bar in KC. That was our watering hole. And you know, we did a hell of a business too. And one day, John called me aside and said, "Tom, we got a problem." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, it's you." And I said, "Me?" He said, "Yeah, you seem to be our best customer. So maybe it'd be better if you went back to cowboying and let somebody else tend bar." I said, "Okay, that works for me." You know, in that time frame, they had these country dances. And I'm sure you folks have been to some of them. Well, me and another Irish kid, we'd get there and we'd kind of get liquored up a little bit, and we'd get at it. We'd have one hell of a fight. The one of us couldn't stand up, and then they said, "You done?" "Yeah, I'm done." "Oh, let's go back in." We put our arm around each other and went back into dance. And it got so that every time we got to these parties and dances, we got into a fight. So we were the extra added attraction for these events.
With this anecdote, Ray identifies the characteristic in Tom O'Day that kept him from achieving the same notoriety as his more famous running buddies, perhaps in fact to his benefit.
He wasn't a bad person. He just couldn't handle his liquor. And that's what got him into trouble. And he left home when he was 14. And then about that time too, there was some outlaws that moved into the area from Canada and set up shop up in the hole-in-the-wall country. Harvey Logan and the boys. The Outlaw Trail that they kind of pursued started up in Wagner, Montana and went down to El Paso. Any of that area in between there was fair game for robbing and plundering and all that good stuff.
And Tom O'Day's part in all that good stuff was about to get much more exciting and dangerous. Listen as Ray Maple introduces both his character and his audience to some of the most notorious men of the late 19th century, outlaws who operated from a home base deep within a long, deeply creviced outcropping of sandstone in north-central Wyoming called Hole in the Wall.
Okay, here's the guys that hung around up there. This was Butch, Sundance, me, Harvey Logan, Walt Putney, and the Roberts brothers, just to name a few. There's old Walt. He and I were pretty good buddies. We served time in the Deadwood jail together. He ended up coming back to Wyoming and ended up having a bar up in Pinedale. Harvey Logan, dapper gentleman, but you wouldn't want to get on his bad side. He just soon shoot at you as look at you. Then the leader of the group, Robert Parker. He came from a good family down in Utah, and his dad was a Mormon bishop. They had a pretty nice spread, and they had this foreman named Mike Cassidy. Mike was an outlaw, and we'd go up into Colorado and then up on the Star Valley and up into Utah and rob banks and rustle cows. He got to hanging around with Mike a lot, decided being an outlaw was a whole lot more exciting than working for his old man. So he hung around with Mike a lot, and then he took Mike's last name, changed it to Robert Cassidy. He could have been a CEO in any major business today. He was that well organized. And people respected him. Ranchers and that all thought he was a pretty good guy. And I'll tell you a couple anecdotal stories as we get into this. He got him a job working at a butcher shop in Rock Springs, and they started calling him Butch. Eureka! Butch Cassidy was born. That picture there shows a race between two fire departments on the main drag. Butch's butcher shop was behind that tree. Then we had Kirkpatrick and then Harry Longlebaugh. Harry was a Pennsylvania boy like myself. He came down to Wyoming by way of Canada. He got him a job working for a ranch in Sundance, and things got tight, and the rancher let him go. Well, he didn't think he got enough severance pay, so he took a horse with him. Well, the rancher didn't take too highly about that, so he got arrested, and he served about a year and a half in the jail there in Sundance. He got out early because he had some connections. The governor gave him a reprieve, and from that point on, he was called Sundance. Elsie Lay, he's an interesting person. He was a mining engineer. Decided he could make more money robbing banks than working for the mine. And you had these other characters. And then a picture of me over in the corner, posed real well. Then we had, I guess you'd call them groupies today, we had some women that hung around the hole. Among those was Etta Place. She was a schoolmarm, very well poised. She was a heck of a nice woman. And she could ride, rope, shoot, and cuss with the best of them too. Then they had Ann Bassett, and she was friends with Butch for a while and Ben Kirkpatrick. Then Josie Bassett, her sister, she was real close with Elsie Lay, Will Carver, and Butch sometimes. And then Laura Bullion, she was a real hellcat. Little story here, look at those pictures. Down around Price, Utah, there's a story going around that Etta Place and Ann Bassett were one and the same.
Maple uses Tom O'Day as his centerpiece, but he covers a wide gamut, peppering his show with anecdotes about Lander, Lost Cabin, Rawlins, Casper, KC, DuBois, Cody, Shoshone, Buffalo, Thermopolis, and other familiar Wyoming spots and the people who pass through them.
There's another picture of the hole. Not a good place to winter in either. There's a trail going up into that box canyon. Robert Redford wrote a book about the Outlaw Trail, and this picture was in it. You go up to the top there, you see a guy on horseback about ready to make a left-hand turn. He makes a left-hand turn and follows the edge of that sandstone to where there's a gap, and you can jump your horses up that gap and get over the top. No way in heck would I go over it, coming or going, but we did do that. Here's a little story about a fella out of Lander, Pushroot Jim. Pushroot got his name because he's farmers. And by the way, while I'm thinking about it, do you know what Landers was going to be called at one time? Pushroot, Wyoming. Fortunately, somebody changed it. That's like that town between Lander and DuBois called Never Sweat, Wyoming. But anyway, old Pushroot stole some horses, and a posse caught him on the South Fork of the Powder, and they had a shootout, and Pushroot got killed. Well, they didn't want to bury him, so they just threw him over the creek bank and left him. Well, I'd been in town to the sandbar a few months after that, and spent all my money. Good place to spend it was a sandbar. So on the way home, I found these bones along the creek bank. I got to looking at them, and I said, by God, they're human bones. I wonder if that's old Pushroot. And the more I thought about it, the madder I got. So we got up into the hole, and I talked to the fellas, said, hey fellas, I think I found what happened to old Pushroot. And they said, you did? And I said, well, you know, I think I'm gonna go up there and get a shovel and a saddle blanket and give him a decent burial. So the fellow said, well, let's all go. So we went up there and found what we could, put it in the gunny sack and buried it. And by God, we felt pretty darn good about it. We might be outlaws, but we still had a little trace of decency. And then we went back to the cabin and had one hell of an Irish wake. Now here is the good stuff. The Great Bill Foosh Bank Robbery. We did our best jobs kind of in June. This was June 28, 1897. Well, there'd been Sundance and me and Walt Putney and Roberts Brothers and Kid Curry were at the hole, and we decided we're going to go and rob that bank. We heard that it was owned by an old rancher and had a lot of money in it. So we rode all the way from the hole to a hillside outside of Belle Fourche and then set up camp. Well, they sent me into town to case the joint, as they say today. Well, I got in there and found out where the bank was, most important, and where the livery stable was and the mercantile. And then I'm going past Sebastian's Saloon, and there's noise coming out of it, people having a good time. And I opened the doors, and by God, there was a bunch of old cavalry fellows that were celebrating some battles of the Civil War, kind of a reunion. And I knew a few of those guys, and they said, hey, Tom, come in and have a beer. You know, it was a hot day, and I was sweaty, and boy, that sounded pretty good. So went in there, and I had 3 or 4. Back then, beer was about 17%, and they serve it to you in these great big mugs with a foam head on there. Man, that was good. And about 3 or 4 of those had put a good man down. Matter of fact, I spent the night on a pool table covered up with a saddle blanket. Well, I was pretty hungover then, so they said, Monday morning we're going to go to Belle Fourche and rob that bank. So we get up there and we get into town about 10 o'clock. Kid Curry says, Tom, you get over there by Sebastian's Saloon. You kind of know what's going on there. And well, you get up there by the livery stable, keep an eye on things, and me and the rest of the guys are going to walk around town. Well, it was getting towards noon, and it was getting hot, and I was getting thirsty. So by golly, I had to go in and have a cool one. Well, meanwhile, the guys got up to the bank. They got up there and got in before the safe timer opened the safe. And they got into an altercation with one of the clerks. The clerk fired on Kid Curry, but his cap didn't go off, fortunately. Well, so they had to wait about 10, 15 minutes for the vault to get open. Well, he got open and they got their money and they headed out of town. Well, I'm up there at the bar having a cool one. And I hear bang, 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 bang. And I look out and by God, they're leaving me. They left me behind. By God, I better get on my horse. So I kind of stumble and stagger out to the front of the saloon, to the hitching rail, put my foot in the stirrup, and my horse shies away and he's following the rest of the boys. I'm in the middle of the street. What the heck's going on? Oh, I look over there, that mercantile, and there's a mule tied up over there. I want to take him. So I amble over there and try and jump on that mule, and just as I'm jumping on there, a voice comes from inside there and says, "Hey, that's my mule, get away from him." And the mule shies away and I end up on my keister. Well, things are getting pretty exciting. So I get up and I go hiding behind Sebastian's saloon. And things are really getting exciting then. Well, I find this hidey hole. Couldn't find a better place. Well, I'm sitting there meditating and the door flies open. Deputy opens the door and says, "You're under arrest." I said, "For what?" "For robbing the bank." "Hey, how could I rob a bank? I don't have my gun." I'd taken it off and threw it down in that other hole. He said, "You're still under arrest. Come with me." So he took me towards the jail. I got pretty close to it and that's all I found. "Where's the building?" "Well, it burned down. We had a vagrant, got cold, lit a fire and burned it down. But that's where you're going." So they put me in there. And that night they had one hell of a rainstorm. You know how those gully washers get. Well, they felt sorry for me and put me in the vault. So that was as close as I was going to come to any real money. Rest of the guys, they made it up to Red Lodge, and they got caught later on. They transported me and Walt and Curry to Deadwood and put us in the Deadwood jail. Well, they caught the rest of the guys up in Red Lodge and they brought them down, so we were all together again, family reunion. Well, come Halloween, the jailer left the key in the lock and we made a break. We got as far as Sturgis before they caught us, hauled us back into jail. And they held the trial while we were in absentia. And come to find out, the guys only got $92.50. Hell of a robbery. So they got some jail time. Walt and I, we got off because they couldn't have enough information on us. Then we had the Wilcox train robbery. That was another one in June, 1899. UP was transporting a lot of money. So it was decided that we go down and lighten its load a little bit, which we did. On the way down, we stopped at ranches about every 30 miles and cut a deal with them for fresh horses. And that was one of Bush's secrets. He always made sure that we had fresh remounts every so often. The posse didn't. And the ranchers liked Butch because a lot of times if a rancher helped him, they might wake up some morning and find a couple of $20 gold pieces on their windowsill or a haunch of beef or something hanging in their tree. Matter of fact, a little story that was told to me down in Sundance. This old boy, granddad was working in the yard, and Bush came down and asked him, rode in and said, "Sir, could I buy about 6 head of horses?" And the old boy said, "Damn, I'd love to sell you 6 head, but I can't." Butch looks at him and says, "Why not? Why not?" Well, he says, "The banker is coming and going to foreclose on me and won't let me sell anything." Well, Butch mulls it over a little bit and he says, "What can you do? What can I do to help you out of this situation?" And he quoted a figure. Butch pulled into his pocket and pulled out a wad of bills and more than enough to take care of it. He gets these horses and he's down the road. The banker shows up. He gets his money. He's happy as a lark. Heads back to town, but he doesn't quite make it. That's what you call a quicken loan. No deposit, no interest. Well, the train came and stopped. Well, Butch and one of the fellas, or I guess it was a couple of the guys, went up in the cab and got the engineer and the conductor down and they walked back to the baggage car. And the baggage and told the clerk inside there, "Open up." The old boy says, "Why?" "Well, Butch Cassidy's out here and he wants you to open up." "I ain't gonna do it," the guy says. And then the conductor says, "You might want to think twice on that. He just told me he's got some dynamite." Okay, the door flies open, jump up in there, safe's right in the middle. Open the safe. I can't, don't have a key, don't have the combination. They only have it at each end. "All right, we can take care of that. Bring the dynamite up." Put 11 sticks underneath there. Blew it up. We had money coming down like confetti. Some of it was whole, some of it wasn't. But we got a couple of gunny sack loads and we headed off. That's what an express car looks like after you blow it up.
Through other tales of bank robbery, horse thieving, shootouts, trials, and jails, Ray Maple spins more richly detailed yarns about Tom O'Day and his cohorts, including his version of what really happened to Butch and Sundance. In the end, says Ray, Tom O'Day emerges as an outlaw, yes, but not a very dangerous one.
That guy said I was a bad one, only when I drank.
How long have you been portraying Tom O'Day?
About 22 years. And I get to talking to people and I'll slip in and out of character and they don't know whether they're talking to Tom O'Day or Ray Maple. And I had a newspaper gal interview me. And she said, "Now at the outset, who am I talking to? Am I talking to Ray or am I talking to Tom?" A little bit of both.
Funding for this program is made possible in part by the Wyoming Humanities Council, helping Wyoming take a closer look at life through the humanities. thinkwhy.org, and by the members of the Wyoming PBS Foundation. Thank you for your support.